Hello everyone and welcome to another video. As you might have guessed from the thumbnail and the title, this is gonna be the much awaited mid-year book freakout tag, which is kind of a must do around this time of the year. I've seen so many of these. So let's just jump into the questions. And the first question is, what is the best book you've read so far this year? And I have two books for this, which I rated 5 stars on Goodreads. And the first one is Infidel by Ayaan Hirsi. This is a memoir in which the author tells about her life from when she grew up in Ethiopia and then her escaping and finally settling as a refugee with her family in Kenya because of internal turmoil and civil unrest and revolution and so forth in her country. Later on, she alone escaped and sought refuge in the Netherlands because her family tried to forcibly marry her to someone living in Canada, so a Muslim man living in Canada. And she tells about her journey in the Netherlands where she learned the language. She was an interpreter and then she became a congresswoman, and she actually changed certain laws in the country to help the immigrant situation, which is kind of contestable because she's against refugees, she's against immigration. But when you read this book, you really understand where she's coming from, and knowing her backstory, you would understand why she was pushing for the laws she was pushing for. She is living now in the US after a tragic thing that happened in the Netherlands, where she made a short film about representing Muslim women and their lives together with this producer called Theo Van Gogh, and he was murdered because of this. So she had to also live in fear of being murdered and living in hiding and changing identities and being protected by the government in the Netherlands until they stopped protecting her. And now I think she's living in the US, and she has written several books, so I think I might pick up more of her books. This is a really tragic story of her life, of her family ties, of the religion she grew up with, and how toxic that she found that to be later in life. And this is also has strong feminist themes. So I can only recommend this if you like memoirs, but beware that this is not an easy one to read. And the second one I gave 5 stars to is Sheherazade Goes West by Fatema Mernissi. This is a book by this author who is from Morocco. And in this book, she goes on a book tour to promote this book she wrote. And on that book tour, she ends up having all these questions when it comes to the Western world and the Western journalists she meets, because the book she wrote was about her grandmother growing up and living her whole life in a harem, and she also, I think, was born there. And for her and for her grandmother, this harem life was so much like a prison. She didn't have any individual freedom. So her grandmother told her many times that if you can, travel as much as you can, because not only you would understand yourself better, but you will also understand the different cultures you travel to. So this is what she does. And on this book tour where she's promoting this book, she encounters all these journalists who seem to have this really playful smile on their faces when they ask the inevitable question, were you really born in a harem? And she doesn't really understand why is this such a playful, almost happy smile, because this was really not the best place to be, and she really didn't have any freedom, her grandmother that is. And she embarks on this mission to find out why Western men have this playful smile on their lips when they ask this question. And then she goes on comparing Western culture and Eastern Oriental culture, and taking different things into account, as for example old myths from her country, and also the myth and the story of Sheherazade, and how that changed and morphed with time in the Western world, and how that myth, that figure, which is so important to her people because Sheherazade was such a strong female character, has really turned into this almost simpering lady who wears nothing and is just such a submissive lady. And that's not the Sheherazade she knows from the Arabian Nights. So I really love those comparisons, and I think for me that book was fascinating. It turns out maybe to be not the most, how you call, innovative theories she writes in these books, because I guess these theories and these subjects were written about before. But for me, this was a completely new take and new view on these things, which I guess I have not encountered before. So I can only recommend it, especially if you like books with this topic, with the topic of feminism, or feminism within the West compared to the East, compared to the Orient, and so on and so forth. It is a bit dated though, but for what it is and what it did for me, I think it was amazing. So I can only recommend it. The next question is, what is the best sequel you've read so far this year? And I haven't read a lot of sequels because I just didn't this year. I normally read a lot because I read a lot of fantasy, but I guess the few sequels I read, I don't really care to mention here. But the one I want to mention is actually a book I finished just a few hours before filming this video, and that is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang, and this is the third book in the Poppy War series. So in this series we follow a young girl from a southern province in this empire. A southern province is like a poor province where people of darker skin live, and they're a bit discriminated against in the capital, where I guess in the north, where I guess people of fairer skin live, more wealthier people. She gets into this really elite military academy after working so hard. It is nearly impossible to get in there, but she does it. And there she has to fight for her right to be there, because she is discriminated against over and over again because of where she comes from, but also because of who she is, and again because of the color of her skin. Quickly this setting in the military school turns into full-on war, and then we follow this girl throughout this war, in which she plays more and more of an important role, because she's a shaman. She can channel the phoenix, and she has the power of fire. So what I really enjoyed in this third book, without spoiling it too much, is the commentary it made on race, because there is a foreign empire coming to this land which is already plagued by internal turmoil, and they are a superior race who see these people as lesser, and there's just it's so greatly woven into this story, the role of Rin, who is already discriminated against because of her color, and how she plays the central role in this war, in which the ultimate war is against this empire, who is discriminating against her whole country. So I really enjoyed it. And again, this depicts the aftermath of war and all the gruesomeness and all the destruction and the famine and everything that you really don't see that much in fantasy. This is really steeped into Chinese history and is based on history like that. And if you haven't read it, I can only recommend it. Beware that all of the 3 books are this thick though. So it is a great fantasy if you want to read fantasy which is of an Eastern background, in this case Chinese. Next question is let me see new releases you haven't read yet but want to. And I have mentioned this book over and over again, but I think I will finally read it in either July or August. But that is Kazuo Ishiguro's Klara and the Sun. I don't know much about this other than this is kind of like I think I would say sci-fi. It has sci-fi elements because Klara is an artificial intelligence, so she is an AI, and this book is about her. I don't know, the sun. Maybe it has some environmental commentary on the environment. I have no idea, but I really want to go in blind. I really love Kazuo Ishiguro's books, and I'm pretty sure I will enjoy this one as well. And I have recently discovered that actually there's the 4th book in the Witchlands series by Susan Dennard out, which is called Witchshadow. And I think it came out on the 22nd of June. And I really, really enjoyed this series. It's been 2 years maybe since I read the last installment. And I can't wait to get back into it. It is a book which follows a different set of characters throughout each book, but those characters and the books are all intertwined, and they follow a main plot line. I really enjoy it because at its core there's a female friendship, and the main characters have all, I guess, elemental powers. One can tell when someone lies. Another can control people by moving the threads which bind us together in some way. Another can control the wind, and so on and so forth. I really love it. I don't think I have read a lot of fantasy books or a series where I wasn't disappointed by one or other of the installments. But this one has not let me down throughout. I think it has such a well thought out plot, and these characters are so flawed. There's so morally gray at some point, or you don't really know whether they're good or bad. They all have their own stories to tell, and I think it's done absolutely amazingly. So I hope I will get to it pretty soon. The next question is, what is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year? And I have to admit, I'm not really so up to date with the books coming out. I have checked a bit what are the books that will come out, but I don't feel like there's a lot there that interests me, especially since I'm reading mainly literary fiction, fantasy. So if there are any great fantasy books coming out, please let me know. But the one book that I heard that it's coming out, it is the newest book by Sally Rooney, which is called Beautiful World, Where Are You? I don't know much about it, but I have enjoyed both of Sally Rooney's books, Conversation with Friends and Normal People, that I'm sure that I will also enjoy this one. And I mean, at this point, who doesn't want to know what Sally Rooney will come out with next? I think she's an amazing writer, so I can't wait to check this one out. The next question is, what is the biggest disappointment of this year so far? And I have written 2 things down for this one. One I've written is the Bridgerton series, the books. That is because I have binged the Netflix show 2 times already since it came out. So that's why I kind of decided to give the books a go. I don't know why I read 5 or 6 of them though, because they were all disappointing in some way. I think I only enjoyed truly the second book in the series. Other than that, it just did nothing for me. And that comes from someone who can really enjoy a good romance. I don't mind it at all, and I used to read a lot, and I still do. So I haven't even talked about these on my channel. I think at some point we're all Bridgertoned out a little bit on BookTube, but yeah, they were just not for me. I found the writing bad and the tropes bad, and just the plot generally just I just didn't feel there was anything there I could really like, except for the characters and the Bridgerton family and their connection. There was some funny moments, but I think they come through much better in the Netflix series. Let me know what you think about it. Have you given in to the Bridgerton hype? I cannot seem to stay away from a hype for too long before my curiosity overcomes me. But I also wrote down The Shadow Wand by Laurie Forrest, and this is the third book in the Black Witch series, which really disappointed me. I really wasn't sure whether I want to continue with this or not, because the second book in the series was also felt like also such a filler book where nothing happened. But I was like, okay, this is gonna be the final book in what I assumed would be a trilogy. So I'm like, okay, I really enjoyed the first book, so I'm gonna follow this through. I'm just gonna read this. But it was so disappointing. The book started at the point and it ended in the same point, so nothing really happened. We started by following several characters, and then some of them really were left behind, and then we only ended up following the main character, which was fine. But then why introduce these other characters and their perspectives at the beginning if you're not gonna continue? I think that would have given the book some more dynamic feel, but it didn't. And then I found out that this is not even the last book in the series. So another filler book. I was really disappointed, and I'm not going to continue with this series, even though I really enjoyed the first one. Oh well, c'est la vie. And the next question is, what was my biggest surprise? Now, it was hard to pinpoint my biggest surprise, but if I would have to name one, that would be 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. And that is because it is a retelling of the Trojan War through the eyes of the women participating or being connected to it in some way. And I have read 2 books already which deal with this topic. I have read 2 or 1, I'm not sure, but I have read The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, which really was about this exact same thing. And I didn't feel that there were a lot of new things that I could get out of this, so I was a bit afraid that this is gonna be too repetitive. But I prefer this so much more to The Silence of the Girls. I think it was beautifully written. The chapters focused on different women. Some women had more chapters, like Penelope's chapters. I really loved her voice, her tone, her humor, her sarcasm. And overall, all these women who touched upon the Trojan War in some way, even the goddesses were in here, and they actually caused the Trojan War. I didn't know about that. So now I'm definitely gonna pick up The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, which is also about this war, but it focuses on Achilles and I think his relationship with Patroclus, which was also quite a big part of The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. But I think if you love Madeline Miller's books, I have previously read Circe by her, and I absolutely loved it. You would definitely enjoy this one as well. So I can, again, only recommend it. The next question is a favorite new author or a debut you read. And here I have to mention Mariana Enriquez, because I have read both of her short story collections, which were translated into English. I have read Things We Lost in the Fire and The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, which are horroristic short story collections, and I absolutely loved both. Even though they're so hard and horrific and gruesome at points, there's just something about her matter-of-fact writing style which really pulled me in, and I just keep wanting to know where she's going next, what is she coming up with next. She writes about mainly women and children within the Argentinian context and city life, and she intermingles these stories with superstition and horroristic elements. So if you love short stories, if you love horror books, then you should definitely check these out. I can only recommend them. Now we're coming over to the questions where I'm always struggling with, because I have to name a newest fictional crush or a newest favorite character, and it's not something I really think about that much when reading, and especially when reading non-fiction memoirs or literary fiction. I don't think I think about whether a certain character is favorite or whether I'm crushing on certain characters or not. But if I have to mention a newest fictional crush, I would have to talk about Nesha in this series, and particularly in this book. I think he's such a misunderstood character, and you really have to know him, understand his motivations to see how difficult the choices he has and how much he has to make and how much he's sacrificing for the good of his country. So if I would ever crush on someone from a fantasy book, maybe on him. I don't know. He also seems to be quite good looking with broad shoulders, so that's always a win, and a chiseled jaw. I don't know. Okay, moving on. Newest favorite characters. Now, here, newest favorite character, I think is the question, but I'm gonna say characters because I have a whole gang of people here, and that is because I read The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie, and I have listened to it. I think in a span of like 2 months, I just listened a bit and then listened a bit again next day throughout lunch and so on and so forth. And oh my god, it was such a joy to go back in this world and follow these people and their journeys and how they ended up together in this first book to kind of set on an adventure. I really, really enjoyed this first installment of this series. And I think it was a perfect first book. And if you love a slow-paced fantasy with heavy character focus, you will definitely love this one. The only issue I had with it was the lack of female characters. I mean, they trickled in towards the middle end, but they felt a bit too stereotypical. So I hope this is gonna change in the following installment of this series. This is such a beloved fantasy series, and it has such a huge fandom, and I can see why, because these characters are magnificent. They are so flawed and so vivid on the page. It's just amazing. If you love fantasy and you haven't picked up The Blade Itself yet, please do so. You will not be disappointed. And the next question is, what is the book that made you cry? And here I have to mention The Death of Vivek by Akwaeke Emezi. I have previously tried to read Freshwater by this author, and I was really disappointed because that was too much steeped in magical realism. But this was so much more accessible, I think, to a wider audience. And I can see it becoming really like a truly modern classic. It's such a beautiful story about this man I think from Nigeria, who is different, Vivek, and we follow him from before he was born. We follow his family, the family dynamics, and then he's born, and we follow him until he dies. And this book was beautiful because it is about him, his death, but we don't really get to meet him personally. We don't really see his perspective, apart from a very, very small flicker where we get to see things from his eyes. But we follow all the different people around him and how they relate to him, because Vivek knows who he is, and he knows what he wants and how he wants to be. All he wants was that others accept him as he is. And in this book, we follow all those people around him and how they relate to him. And it is just heartbreaking. So if you haven't picked this up yet, please do so. Now, a book that made me happy. That is the next question number 11. And for this, I don't know if it really made me happy as in chuckling and smiling and laughing and such, because I don't really read books like that. But I have read The Sicilian Romance by Anne Radcliffe, and I have also read Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I actually made a video of these two books, and The Gothic Romance. And I had so much fun reading, especially The Sicilian Romance, because it's like the quintessential Gothic romantic novel. It's so over the top. Today I can only compare it to the Spanish or South South American telenovelas, in the drama, in the excess, in the melodrama, I would say. They're so over the top. It was so funny to read, and I can really see where elements of these are being taken and used today in novels which have gothic elements. So if you haven't tried an Anne Radcliffe novel before and you are curious, please do so. It was also so easy to read, incredible, being, I think it came out in the late 1700s, something like that. I was afraid that it's gonna be hard to read, but it's not. The next question is about the most beautiful book you have bought this year so far. And for this, I have to mention Zuleika by Güzel Yakhina. And I bought this recently because of the cover, simply because of the cover. I mean, isn't this beautiful? I love the snow, the ice, and the green with the women's eye and the title. I think it's one of the most beautiful books I bought this year. And the inside is also white with green. I don't know. I don't normally go for this is how it looks on the inside. So I know I don't normally go for covers, but it happens every once in a while. And I also happen to like the premise of this. So this is set. When is this set? This is set during or after the Russian Revolution, and we follow this woman whose husband is taken away because I guess he tried to hide some food from the communists, so he is executed, sorry, not taken away. And then she is arrested and taken and exiled into Siberia. And I guess this is her story. I've never seen this book in Denmark until I bought it on sale. And then I went home to Romania last week and I went into some bookshops and it was everywhere. I'm happy I found it. I think it's gonna be a good one. Maybe I should buy a Romanian version for my mother because she loves historical fiction. And then the last question is what books you need to read by the end of the year. Okay. And what books? Oh, I don't know. Many, all. I think for the most part, I want to continue following and catching up to the Invisible Cities project. And maybe I'll try to catch up as much as I can now in July and August. So in August, I can focus on something else I've been planning for a while, but I haven't managed to get to. I have quite a stack out from the library, which will help me catch up on some of those titles for that project. So yeah, that's what I want to do. And I would definitely want to get up to date towards the end of the year with this project, because you're supposed to read 2 books each month from different countries, 3 books, and then from August I think it's 2 books. So I'm quite behind, even though I thought I'm doing well, but no. And then I also want to read 1 book which was on my radar for quite a while because it's a new release which sounded really interesting, and I borrowed it twice from the library in audio format, really without managing to read it. So I really want to get to it, and that is How Beautiful We Were by Imbolo Mbue. And this is about a village, in an African village, its people and its community whose lives are kind of destroyed by this foreign corporation who comes and kind of destroys their environment. So it sounded really amazing. So I guess this is where I leave you. And I hope you are enjoying your summer wherever you are and spending some time with friends and family and taking some vacation and just enjoying, I guess, the weather. Here in Denmark, we have some good weather, some bad weather, but I went home for a week last week and we had the most intense heat wave I've experienced in my entire life, I guess. So yeah, thankfully we spent it around the pool and such, so it was quite nice. Okay, but this is where I will leave you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.